What's up, everybody? You are listening to Come On Man, a 3% Man podcast. I'm your host, Paul Bauer, and I am on the road to being a 3% man just like you. If you're new to the show, this is a podcast for fellow students of Corey Wayne's book, How to Be a 3% Man, and for men who just want to be better in general. We talk about dating, gaining wealth, being happy, and using the law of attraction to get everything we want in life. Welcome, everybody. We're several weeks into the podcast now, and the feedback keeps coming back so positive. Sincerely, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in every week and, joining in on discussions on the 3% Man board and just being, active in our little community. It's super awesome. We share so much knowledge with each other. One thing I think I may have mentioned it in a previous episode, but I've tried podcasting before, and it was just too difficult. I once had a political show, and I was trying to do it on a weekly basis, but you have to always stay up to date on the current events, and that was just like shit. I had to sit down and read all these news articles and write out a script, and it was just. This is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be just a hobby. And that ended up being a full-time job, so I stopped doing that. And then also years ago, I had a tech show on YouTube called Tech Chop. It's still there. You could go on YouTube and check it out. It's pretty fucking dated now, though. But it wasn't even that good either because for the same reason. When I first started that, I would do it once a month. And so I could actually put my heart and soul into it and put together a pretty decent episode, but then I got sponsors for it and they wanted an episode every week. And so it became another full-time job and it was just too much work, so same reason I had to constantly think of, okay, what am I going to talk about this time? Now, come on, man. This podcast has been effortless so far. I'll be sitting on the couch and I'll come up with an idea. I'll read a book or something and I'll come up with an idea, or I'll just do a Zoom call with one of you guys and I could talk to, so far, I could talk to you guys for hours. So those episodes are super easy to put together. And I can also record multiple episodes in a week and, excuse me, I can do multiple episodes in a week and just schedule them out. And it's just been so fun to make this. So thank you for tuning in. Now, this week's episode, I kind of want to do an intro on building wealth because, I have that as, our opener and one of our topics as, one of the things we talk about in the show. Being a 3% man is all encompassing. It's not just about being good with women, I think. I feel like it's about being a better man in general. And a part of that is working on your purpose. And for some of us, our purpose is to build wealth. I'm going to talk about it in a little bit about one of the books that I've read that talks about, why building wealth is, for you religious guys. I don't know how many of you on the page are religious or atheist or whatever. That's neither here nor there. But, one of the books I talk about, coming up here, the author argues that building wealth is actually doing God's work because the more money that you have, the more that you can enjoy God's creation, and the more money you have to help other people with. So, whether you believe in that or not is neither here nor there, but it's something to strive for. So, speaking of books on this, on that, I'm going to kind of go through some of this stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the books that I've read on building wealth. I've read tons of books on it, so I'm just going to keep it to a select few that I think are very helpful. I'm going to talk about things that I'm doing now that are working pretty well for me. And, I might even touch on some things that haven't worked so well. So we'll get into that, coming up. But first, let's talk about some of these books. So the first book I'm going to talk about, and it's pretty much going to be the theme of that book is what's going to be what I'm going to really get into a little bit more detail about in this episode. And that's called Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. It's a phenomenal book. Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. I can't recommend it enough. It's on my list of top 10 life-changing books because I wish it has information in it, kind of like 3% Man, where you wish that you learned this when you were younger. My parents didn't know anything about this shit. They didn't know anything about investments. They always made it seem like money is something that's really hard to get. You have to work really fucking hard for it and stuff like that. But Dave Ramsey breaks it down into a wealth building system that literally anyone can fucking do. It is such a genius strategy that I'm going to share a little bit with you today. Obviously I'm not going to be able to cover everything that's in that book. So I highly recommend you guys, if you're, building wealth and retiring, rich is something that is a goal for you, like it is for me. I highly recommend that book. The next book I'm going to, that I read that I'm going to mention is Money Mastering the Game by Tony Robbins. And, a lot of people love Tony Robbins and he's a hell of a fucking speaker, but I'll tell you this, after going through Total Money Makeover and I also went through Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, but to be honest, it's just, an extended version of Total Money Makeover. And really you only really need to read Total Money Makeover. But Money Mastering the Game by Tony Robbins, in my opinion, is almost a complete ripoff of Total Money Makeover. He basically comes up with the same strategies that Dave Ramsey does. He just has a slightly different take, which I'll talk about. Another book that's just as fascinating to read in general is The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley. And that book is interesting because, a lot of people, when they think of wealthy people, they think of someone like, I don't know, Donald Trump or, what's his name? Richard Branson, the guy who runs Virgin. You think of these like billionaire playboys that walk around in suits and ties and they have, private jets and limos and shit like that. But when Thomas Stanley did his study of millionaires, most millionaires aren't like that. They're very like frugal people. They don't spend money on lavish things, instead of buying, fucking Ferraris and stuff like that. They buy, very reliable like Fords. They don't buy these, multi-million-dollar mansions all the time. Sometimes they buy, a $500,000 house in the suburbs. You would never know that they're millionaires because they're not like most millionaires aren't super flashy. So they're just, really good with money. Another book I read, which is a good book, but I don't think it really gives you like in-depth strategy, is Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I mean, it's a, multi-time bestseller, and it's fascinating. And he talks about, basically a really good thing he talks about is the mindset between his poor dad, which was his biological dad, and who he calls his rich dad, which was his friend's dad, that he would always go over to that guy's house, and that guy taught Robert Kiyosaki about money. And, a good theme in that book is that we don't really learn about money in school. We learn how to work for a living, and even then what they teach us in school is basically useless. So what he seriously recommends is learning about money and how money works, and how, at least in America, we have the fractional reserve system. And so basically, we all live off of monopoly money. And so Robert Kiyosaki, asserts that if you really want to get rich, you can take advantage of our monetary system and borrow money and use that, for investments that, what he calls, are investments that invest for cash flow, right? So a lot of his stuff is buying real estate. So if you buy yourself an apartment complex, you have constant cash flow coming in because you have, the recurring rent payments and stuff like that. So that's just, very high level But, he also talks about the difference between assets and liabilities. And, one of the things that he differs on, or a couple of things he differs on, one is borrowing. I say differs on from Dave Ramsey. He's all about, getting into debt and using debt to build wealth, whereas Dave Ramsey is like, no debt, zero debt, never use a credit card, shit like that. Robert Kiyosaki's like, no, you need to borrow money to make money. And so there's, different philosophies there. Another thing he talks about, Dave Ramsey talks about your house is an investment, whereas Robert Kiyosaki says, no, your house is not an investment, it's a liability. And, I can see both sides of that argument. But Robert Kiyosaki's argument is that you buy a house, you live in it, but when shit breaks, you got to pay to fix it. So it's actually taking money out of your pocket when you have to do stuff like that. And anything that takes money out of your pocket is a liability, according to Robert Kiyosaki. Another book by Robert Kiyosaki that I think is a good book is another good book is called Fake. And, a lot of the theme in that book is how he feels like our monetary system is going to collapse someday. And I've seen lots of things about that. We are trillions of dollars in debt as far as the national debt goes. And it's almost like a big pyramid scheme because we keep printing more money. So that book, a lot of that is about hedging your other investments by buying gold and silver, which I do. I put in about $200 a month. I think right now it's really not that much, but I have a Goldline account, and $200 a month, so $100 worth of silver, $100 worth of gold every month. And I have it on autopilot, so I don't even think about it. Because it's always good to have that, and he calls that God's money, because no matter what kind of paper money and fractional reserve system we have, gold has always throughout history been worth something. So if all this fake, the book's called Fake, all this fake money eventually goes away, you'll still have something valuable that other people won't have. And so you'll have a leg up on them if you have what he calls God's money, gold and silver. Another great book, and a lot of you guys on the page have read it, and I think that's where I got the idea to read this from, is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Now Think and Grow Rich is a fascinating book. One of the guys that I admire a lot, I talk about a lot, is Bob Proctor. And Bob Proctor spent something like 60 years reading and rereading Think and Grow Rich, kind of like how we're all supposed to be reading and rereading 3% Man. Bob Proctor read that book for over and over again for 60 plus years. And a lot of that has to do with the law of attraction, but a big portion of that is having a good idea and setting goals. And so, you can't become a millionaire if you don't set that as a goal for yourself. Like, by the time I retire at 60 years old or 55 or whatever you want to retire at, I'm going to have $10 million in the bank. And you have to set that as your definite goal and burn that into your subconscious mind so that your subconscious mind drives you to that. And you might not know how you're going to get there, but just having that in your subconscious mind, according to Napoleon Hill, you're eventually going to come up with a grand idea that will get you there. And like he talks about some of the greatest, wealthiest people in our history, because that book came out in like 1936 or 1937, and he talks about like Henry Ford and Thomas Edison and what's his name, Andrew Carnegie, and how all those guys basically got rich because of how they thought, and they set goals, and they were persistent at those goals, and they achieved the wealth that they wanted. So that's a great book on that subject. Another one that's on the same subject as The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles, that came out in 1911. And that's 100% about the law of attraction. That book is all about, putting, not just having a thought in your subconscious, but having feeling and emotion behind that thought will attract riches into your life. Now, I already did an episode on the law of attraction, so that's not what we're going to be focusing on in this episode. But those are great books if you're into that sort of thing. Now, this episode's going to really focus more on Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover type strategy, because I feel like, the law of attraction stuff, it's one of those things where you either believe it or you don't believe it. It's almost like religion, although there's a lot of science-based stuff behind it. So this episode's not going to be on that. This is going to be on a practical method that literally anyone can do to retire wealthy. The only people that I think will struggle with this strategy are people that are already close to retirement age and they have no savings, because those guys are behind the 8 ball, and they're not going to be able to make enough using this method, which is almost like a saver's method, because there's just not enough time left. This method really favors people that start early in life. If you're an 18-year-old kid right now listening to this podcast, fucking start right now, because you could probably retire at my age if you do this. I'm going to tell you right now. So let's get into it a little bit. One thing I will say that like a key point in the Total Money Makeover strategy, and pretty much every rich person will tell you this, is you need to pay yourself first, right? So when you get money in, and Robert Kiyosaki's book talks about this too, when you get paid, let's say you have a job, you work at McDonald's. I don't know what the fuck you're doing. You're probably not working at McDonald's though, if you're, listening to this sort of thing. But if you are, whatever, no judgment. But when you get that paycheck, you want to pay yourself first, right? That means like a lot of people get their money and they immediately spend it on booze or women, or they, pay bills or whatever. And then they have no money until next payday. And they're like, fuck, what happened to all that? Really, you want to pay yourself first. And the way, Dave Ramsey does it is, with investments and stuff like that. And I'll get into that. But basically, Dave Ramsey has a genius plan called the baby steps, right? He has 7 baby steps to financial freedom. So the first baby step is what is called the emergency fund. So what he wants you to do is when you get your paycheck, first thing you do is you take whatever you can afford out of that. So maybe like 10% of that paycheck or 15% of that paycheck, and you sock it away in a savings account as an emergency fund. And you keep doing that every payday until you have $1,000 in there. That's your emergency fund. Because what a lot of people do, if they have an emergency, like say they have a broken windshield, or I don't know, I'm trying to think of an emergency. They get in a car wreck or something. They need to fix maybe the engine blows, or I don't know, some car breaks down. They have an emergency. What they do is they take it to the shop and they put it on the credit card. So maybe a $400 repair here, and then you have another emergency. Fuck, now that's another, $700 on the card. And next thing you know, you got $20,000 of fucking credit card debt. And you're like, how the fuck did this happen? Well, the amazing thing, if you put $1,000 away into an emergency fund, and when your car breaks down, you pay out of that emergency fund, it's not much of an emergency anymore, because you have money set aside for that. Now, Dave Ramsey recommends putting it into a savings account because it's easily accessed. I prefer an Acorns account because, Dave Ramsey doesn't like the idea of Acorns, but I don't think he understands the full concept of it. But Acorns is great. If you have never heard of Acorns, they're not a sponsor of the show at all. I just love it because it's almost like a savings account, except for your money is actually being invested in ETFs and index funds and stuff like that. And you can set your portfolio on aggressive or moderate or, super safe, where they're only investing in bonds. But the thing is that when you put the money in there, it actually grows. Whereas you put it in a savings account, you're basically losing money. With the way interest rates work right now, you're basically losing money if you put it in a savings account. So I like to have my money in Acorns account because it grows faster. It's actually, invested. So that's, and another thing I like about Acorns too is over a savings account is a savings account is too easily to be accessed. So if you are one of those people that likes to buy crap all the time, then having that $1,000 isn't going to stay in your savings account. You're going to fucking spend it on t-shirts or whatever. But when it's in an Acorns account, it actually takes 3 to 6 business days to get that back. So you have to you can't just go and buy shit with it. You have to really think, oh fuck, do I want this? Because I'm going to have to wait 3 to 6 days to get that money out. So what I do I actually do both now. I have $1,000 in a savings account because I got really good at it. And then I have Acorns for, I call it cash for stuff, or if I have a lot of stuff, like a big emergency that's over $1,000, then I can pull it out of the Acorns and then offset that with a credit card. And then I just pay the credit card off with the money I pull out of Acorns. So I always keep a zero balance on that credit card. But, so that's the first step, $1,000 emergency fund. And, you can do it in a savings account or Acorns, like I like doing it. And then, like I said, when you have an emergency, you pull out of that. And then when you get paid again, you go back to baby step 1 here and just fill that back up until you have an emergency fund again. The next step in the baby steps is, I call it the debt snowball, but it's really, you pay off your debts. And the way the debt snowball method works, and a lot of people argue against it because mathematically it doesn't make sense, which I agree with. However, and I say that because a lot of people say to pay off your debts, you want to line it up by which debts are the highest interest, and you want to pay off your highest interest debts first because the highest interest debts are costing you more money. But if you were good at math to begin with, you wouldn't have all that debt, according to Dave Ramsey. So use his method, the debt snowball method. And I've used that to get out of debt, and it fucking works great because you get quick wins fast. And you're actually able to pay off your debt way faster with this method. So the way that works is you actually, instead of lining your debts up by interest rates, you line it up by your smallest debt to highest debt. So let's say you have a car payment, you only owe, $4,000 left on that. But you have $20,000 in credit card debt, you have $40,000 in student loans, and then let's say you have a house that's $100,000. You line it all up to the smallest. So the smallest one would be your car payment. And what you do, so all that money that you were putting in your emergency fund, that 10 to 15%, you now want to take that money and start putting extra on your lowest debt first. So the money that you're putting in your emergency fund, you now swing that over and start throwing that at your debt. So all the other debts, you pay the minimum amount that you would be paying normally, but on your lowest debt, you start throwing that emergency fund percentage extra at it so that debt gets paid off as fast as possible. Then you take that 10% that you were throwing extra at that debt, you take the amount that you were throwing at that debt, and now you snowball that into the next highest one. So now it's your credit card that I said you have $20,000 on. So now you pay your normal credit card payment plus what you were paying on the car plus that 10% that you had in your emergency fund until that's all paid off. Then you take everything that you were paying on that, the minimum payment there plus your, the 10% emergency fund plus what you were paying on the car. Now you throw that at your student loans, right? See how that snowballs? Like every little bit more gets thrown at the next one into a literal snowball where you're eventually debt free. And it's such a genius method, and you get these quick wins, and it feels so good when you pay off one debt and then you're like, fuck yeah, I'm going to use this, throw this money at the next one, and then you start seeing that going down fast. Oh my God, it's a great feeling. It's such a good feeling. And another, great thing, which I'll get into here in the third baby steps, which is once you get all that paid off, then you take all that money you were paying on your debts and you start throwing it at your emergency fund again until you have 3 to 6 months worth of savings. And that means, you want to, for all this, Dave recommends, setting a really good budget so that you know where every dollar's going. So by now you should, after you've read that book, you should have a budget already set up. So you should know like what your expenses cost you every month. So what you want to do is count up all of your expenses, food, clothing, all your, utility bills and stuff like that. And, how much you're paying per month. And you want to times that by 3 or 6. And then you want to take all that money you were throwing at your debt snowball and throw it into your emergency fund until you have that saved. Now, he talks about once you have this 6 months savings in your emergency fund, then you actually have a lot of power now, because when you go to work, if you don't like your job, you can just fucking quit your job. And because you have no bills, right? You have no like serious debt to pay, and then you also have enough money to sustain yourself for 3 to 6 months. So, if your employer is a fucking douche, you're like, you know what? Fuck you, man. I'm out. And they're like, what are you going to do for money? Be like, got an emergency fund, brother. So then you don't have to be so stressed about work. And you can also, now you're free to sort of maybe take some more risks and maybe get a better job and make more money. So there's some other benefits there besides just having, extra money for savings. Also, if you have an issue like COVID, right? COVID's a perfect example of why you should have that, because a lot of people are, their businesses are all fucking shut down. And so they can't work, so they can't make money. And, but if you have 6 months worth of savings, you can get by, until you find something else to do. So it's in general, even if your goal is not to be rich when you retire, it's a fucking smart idea, right? So then that brings me to the next baby step. The fourth baby step is to invest. And really, I feel like you should sort of be doing this anyway. And this goes to paying yourself first. And especially, if you're investing in a company 401k program, because that's getting pulled directly out of your paycheck. It's pre-tax dollars, and your company is actually doing that for you, putting it in your 401k before you even get your paycheck. So that is, paying yourself first, is paying future you, before you get your paycheck, before you divvy it up and pay off your utility bills or whatever. Another thing he also recommends is the Roth IRA. Now, if you're not familiar with either of these things, a 401k is a retirement plan, and what they do is they take pre-tax dollars out of your paycheck, and and they put it in an investment account, and that money grows over time. And the more money you put in, the more and the better investments you pick, the more it grows and stuff like that. But that's pre-tax dollars. So when you finally retire and you start drawing on that, then you start getting taxed on it, right? So you forego paying taxes now, but you're going to get taxed on it later. The Roth IRA is great because it's post-tax dollars. So after you get paid, after all your taxes are taken out of your paycheck, you get your net paycheck. Then you take money from that and put it in a Roth IRA because you've already paid taxes on it. It grows tax-free for the rest of your life. And when you draw on it, when you retire, you don't have to pay any taxes on it. So that growing tax-free and then being able to draw on it tax-free is a huge benefit. So you should absolutely, take advantage of that. And I do both. I absolutely do both. Dave Ramsey says that, a Roth IRA is better than a 401k because it grows tax-free. But he also says that if your company offers a a match. A lot of companies offer a 401k match. So let's say you put in, I don't know, $3,000 a month. I'm just throwing that out there. $3,000 a month. Your company might match that. So they'll throw another $3,000. That's free fucking money. That's free money. So there's no reason to not take advantage of something like that. But both are great, and like I said, I do both of those, and I have them allocated the way Dave Ramsey recommends, which is 25% in large cap stocks. So I don't do stocks. I do index funds. I'll get into that too. He recommends mutual funds. They're essentially the same. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I have 25% in large cap index funds, 25% in mid cap index funds, 25% in small cap index funds, and 25% in international index funds. And it's a super 25, 25, 25 method. And it's worked out great for me. And another thing that he recommends too is looking at your mutual fund or your index fund, and then look at its performance over a long period of time. And most of the time when you're picking your funds in your, whoever your 401ks with or your Roth IRAs with, you can look at 10 to 20 years of their performance, and you can see which ones have traditionally done well in that long period of time, because this investment strategy it's a long game strategy. You're not going to get rich quick. It's all about, sticking with it and putting money in and holding it and stuff like that. So you want to look at how they've performed over a long period of time, 10 to 20 years. So I always pick ones that are at least doing 10%. If they're doing better than 10% over, average over 10 years, that's fucking awesome. So I have all of those allocated the way Dave Ramsey recommends in index funds that have done 10% or better. And I've noticed, especially like last year, the stock market was kicking ass. I think I did a 21% average over that year. Fucking amazing. This year, it's been up and down because of the COVID nonsense. But if I look at it right, I think the last time I looked at it, it was at about 10%, which is still pretty good. And Dave Ramsey talks about, if you start putting money into these index funds, he always does the reference of 12%, because over the last, I think, like 75 years, the S&P 500 has, on average, grown about 12% a year. So that's where he gets that 12% number. And obviously it's not like that every year. Some years are up, some years are down, but on average it trends upwards at about 12%. So as long as you're doing that, you can easily retire with $1 million or more, especially if you start early. Okay. The next baby step is pay off your house. It's pay for your children's college, I think. That's right. I think I might have these backwards, but it's let's do the children's college thing. He wants you to start setting aside a savings for your children's college, because education is important. You want your kids to do well in life and stuff like that. I am not going to be doing that. I'm not going to be doing that because, one, my parents didn't pay for my college. I had to figure out how to do that on my own. I ended up joining the military so that I could get the Montgomery GI Bill to pay for college. But I feel like, having gone through college and hearing stories of other people that either have a free ride or their parents paid for it or whatever, they don't appreciate it. They go to college and they party for 4 years and they barely get by because they're not the ones paying for it. But if you're fucking paying for your own college, you appreciate it. You want to get the most out of it. And that's what I want for my kids. I want my kids, when they go to college, if they go to college, to really respect, the amount of money they're paying for it, and that so they get the most out of it. Now, I also, my parents, raised me with the idea that, if you don't get a bachelor's degree, at least a bachelor's degree, you're not going to be shit in life. And I disagree with that now, because especially with the cost of college being as fucking astronomical as it is, a lot of times people go to college and they can't get a job in the field they want, and so they have all this college debt and no way to pay it off, and they end up working in retail or something like that. So what I tell my kids is go to college if what you want to do for your career requires it. Like my daughter has this dream right now of being a lawyer. I'm like, yeah, then you're going to have to fucking go to college for that. You have to have a degree, and you have to learn about the law so you can go and pass the bar exam and become a lawyer. Same with a doctor. You can't just be a doctor, studying on your own, reading books. You might have the information, but you need to have those certifications and stuff like that in order to legally practice. So yeah, I'm not paying for my kids' college, but that is one of the baby steps. Then the next one is paying off your house. And, if by this time you have some investments and stuff like that, you're probably, doing pretty well. Basically he wants you to start putting extra money on your house to pay it off as soon as you can, because if you have no other debts and you have no house payment and you fucking own everything outright and you pay everything for cash, you have so much more that you can actually invest, and you'll just get that much more wealthy. And then the final baby step, because Dave Ramsey is, he's a hardcore Christian guy. A lot of his stuff, he references the Bible a lot. So if you're like super anti-Christian for whatever reason, you might not enjoy his book. You might like Tony Robbins' book a little bit better. But his last baby step is to donate. Basically, the more you give, the more you eventually get, in life. But also, if you think about it from a non-religious perspective, if you donate to the right things, some of those things have tax benefits. So when things like you're putting more money into your 401k, going back to that, since that's pre-tax dollars, the more money you throw into that actually lowers your taxable income. So you're actually paying, you have to think about it this way. Do you want to pay your future self, or do you want to pay Uncle Sam? Do you want to pay the government, or do you want to pay your future self? I'd rather pay my future self, so I'm going to put more money in my 401k and be taxed less on, my other income. So, same goes with your donate. If you donate to certain charities, that's a tax write-off. That lowers your taxable income right there, and it's a huge tax benefit. There's a reason why rich people don't pay as much taxes as like lower class people. Is because they have more money they can hire better accountants for one, but two, they have all these different ways and incentives in the tax code to reduce their taxable income, and one of those is to donate. So, this might be a longer episode than I expected. So those are the 7 baby steps for Dave Ramsey, and again, this is just a high level, but that's the breakdown of it. So definitely go get that book, read that book, and apply his principles, and you'll be blown away. So, but going changing topics a little bit, we'll talk about Tony Robbins here. And Tony Robbins' book, which is Money Mastering the Game. It's another great book, but like I said, it's almost exactly the same 7 fucking baby steps. He totally ripped that off. And also one thing that I mentioned too is that a big difference is that he recommends low cost index funds instead of mutual funds. So Dave Ramsey's always talking about mutual funds. And so with mutual funds, there's a lot of hidden fees on the back end to pay like portfolio managers, and there's taxes and shit. So although you'll still, make money and your money will still grow in mutual funds, you have to know that some of that is, being removed on the back end to pay people to manage that. Whereas index funds, there's still charges, but there's just less of them. So you actually will gain more money because you are not paying as much. So it's smarter to use index funds instead of mutual funds. Another great thing about mutual funds too, and mutual funds and index funds, is they're already diversified by nature. You ever hear people say, oh, you need to diversify your your investments, well, some people think, well, okay, so I need to put some money in Coke and maybe put some money in AT&T, and then maybe put some money in, Pfizer. And okay, now I'm diversified because I've bought several different stocks. That's bullshit. When you invest in an index fund, you're investing in basically a whole slew of companies in one index. And as the index grows and, as one company is going up and down, other companies are, doing something different. So you're already hedging your bet by buying large swaths of stocks. Instead of buying individual stocks, you're buying like a whole bucket of them. And it's just, a better, safer strategy, because you put all your money in, let's say Coke. Well, if Coke has a shitty year, you're going to lose a lot of money on that one investment. Whereas, if you're investing in a whole bunch of companies, if one company's not doing well, other companies are doing just fine. So you're actually not losing that much money. It's kind of like Bitcoin, which I put a shitload of money in, not a shitload. I put, a few $1,000s in Bitcoin and lost all of it when it tanked. I didn't pull any of that money out. And that's another important thing too, that both Tony Robbins and Dave Ramsey talks about, is when you have these, your money in an investment, you definitely don't want to pull that out. And a lot of people do that. They see the stock market tank. They're like, oh fuck, I got to pull that out before I lose anymore. Well, when you pull it out when the stock market is down or when an investment is down, you lock in that loss. Whereas it's eventually going to come back up. So if you just keep putting money in, especially when you put money in when it's low like that, you're basically buying stocks at a discount, and it's just going to grow that much faster. So with Bitcoin, when it fucking tanked, I also have Litecoin and Ethereum and Ripple and stuff like that. When all that tanked, I stopped putting money in it and just left it there. So now I'm just, leaving it, in my Coinbase account until, Bitcoin gets back up to around the $20,000 mark. And then I think I'm going to pull it all out and put it all into, more index funds or gold or something like that. But I learned early on in this that you don't want to put all your eggs in a basket like that, because when it's, especially Bitcoin, because it's so fucking volatile, that fluctuates so fucking much more than the stock market does. It's unbelievable. But, so yeah, I think that explains index funds and mutual funds pretty well. It's a relatively safe investment because you're putting it in a whole swath of stocks and you're diversified by nature. And then if you buy other, multiple mutual funds or multiple index funds, then you're even more diversified, right? Now, another difference that Tony Robbins recommends over Dave Ramsey, instead of the 25, 25, 25, 25 method, is what he calls Ray Dalio's all-weather diversification strategy. So Ray Dalio was this he's the most successful hedge fund manager of all time. And Tony Robbins asked him how he would recommend putting a portfolio together. And so Ray Dalio recommended 40% in long-term bonds, 30% in stocks, 15% in intermediate-term bonds, 7.5% in gold, and 7.5% in commodities. And then that's supposed to be perfectly diversified. So if the stock market crashes one day, you're not going to lose that much. Honestly, the 25, 25, 25 does pretty well too. Although I will say that at the beginning of COVID, when they shut everything down, I lost $20,000 overnight, but it's all back up now. I got it all back because I didn't pull anything out. But it's still pretty well diversified. And I think even the all-weather strategy would have lost the same amount. So you can do either or. They both, I think, work. And no matter what your strategy is, stick with it. Once you figure out this is the fucking strategy I'm going to go with, just stick with it, because the big key is to make sure you keep putting money into it. Another thing that Tony Robbins recommends that Dave Ramsey, I don't think ever really touched on in his books, I don't remember anyway, is to rebalance once a year. So you're supposed to have these percentages when you start out, but as one bucket in your diversified portfolio starts getting bigger, it's not going to be the same percentage every year, right? So the 25, 25, 25, 25 strategy that I have, you can see it really easily. One of my investments now is like at 30% and another one's at like 20% and stuff like that. And you can see that one's getting fatter, some are getting smaller. And, but when you rebalance all that, it resets the deck. And so I use Empower for both my Roth IRA and my 401k. And Empower's retirement platform is so easy to manage. You can easily set it to rebalance once a year, and you don't even have to think about it. So a lot of my stuff is running on autopilot, and it just rebalances. So like I think in February, it just all goes back to 25, 25, 25. So it takes money, all the extra money from ones that are doing really well and redistributes it to ones that aren't doing as well, or whatever, so that you have that it goes all back to the way you started, and then it grows faster that way, according to Tony Robbins. So so that's pretty much it, with the Tony Robbins stuff versus the Total Money Makeover stuff. So one thing, I just want to reiterate, if you start early enough, like anyone can do this. Anyone can take this strategy, and anyone can take it in basically any career field, and you can retire as a millionaire, And I told my daughter, when she gets her first job here, she's 15, she's been putting in applications. I go, if your company gives you a 401k, take advantage of it. I go, but if they don't, we're going to open up a Roth IRA for you, and I want you to put away 15%, because right now she doesn't have to do a lot of the baby steps because she has no debt. It's going to be her first job. So I was like, I want you to, put $1,000 away in an Acorns account. And then I want you to start putting 15% away in, a Roth IRA or your 401k. And I don't want you to think about it. And then as you grow up and you switch jobs, like just roll it into your, if you have 401k, roll it into your next company's 401k and just keep doing that. And I go, by the time you're my age, you're going to be a millionaire. So yeah, absolutely. Anyone can do it. That's why I love this book and the strategy. Because if you work the system, if you work his system, there's no way you won't be successful with it. And I wish I knew this stuff when I got my first job at 14. And like I said, I'm teaching my kids about it now. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have on this. I'd love to hear your guys' takes on it. If you guys listen to this episode all the way through, because it's a fucking long one, I really appreciate it. Leave a comment on the 3% Man page, what you think about it. If you disagree with Dave Ramsey's strategies, post a thing about it, tag me in it, and let's have that discussion. I really hope that some of you young bucks on the page, really listen to this and, go get Dave Ramsey's book and start now. Start that savings plan now and start, don't get into, a whole bunch of debt. Pay as much as you can with cash and retire rich, goddammit. And always remember to pay yourself first, always. All right, guys, I think I've taken up enough of your time. Until next time. Thank you for listening to Come On Man. If you're new to the podcast, I highly recommend reading How to Be a 3% Man by Corey Wayne at least 10 to 15 times. I recommend you watch his coaching videos on YouTube, and I recommend that you engage with other 3% men in our 3% Man Facebook group. Links to all of these are in the show notes. If you like this episode, please give us a good rating on your podcast platform of choice and share with all of your bros. Now go out and get it.